Hello, and welcome to Sanguinius 40k, your go-to channel for competitive Blood Angel tactics and tips on how to get the most out of your Sons of Sanguinius on the tabletop. In today's video, we'll be going over some of the best ways to currently adapt to the meta with Blood Angels, but this could also be a simple solution to help Marines in general. I'll do my best to keep videos like this shorter and more informative, and as always, the more feedback the merrier, as it helps me improve my content in order to help and entertain you. Without further ado, let's dive on into the topic. So in today's discussion, I wanted to focus on a few specific points that I'll elaborate on as we go. The first point being units that suit your playstyle. At the end of the day, you need to find units that really do look appealing to you on the tabletop and how you want them to approach the board. For example, there's been a common debate on Sanguinary Guard versus Vanguard vets or Sanguinary Guard versus Blade Guard veterans. Now, me personally, I always go on the side of caution in terms of a unit that's more mobile to help me get out of tight places depending on what turn it's on or how early I need to be aggressive or defensive. So mobility always helps me decide what I want to take, but that's just my style. A lot of people need to establish how they want their army to approach the board and whether or not they want that more durable unit, or maybe they like to use more of a castle where blade guards might actually suit their formation a lot better. The next topic I'd like to cover is units that can specifically do niche roles within your army into the top meta picks. So I've actually been messing around with Firstborn Bikers, for example, in recent times. That's because they offer something that a lot of my army can't do, and that's going to be a mobile platform that has a bunch of bolter shots and also can actually do quite well actually in combat with about, I believe it's 13 chainsword attacks when in the Assault Doctrine. This allows me to have another cheap trading unit that, again, has that mobility, can dish out damage in multiple phases of the game, and plays actually quite well into these more recently added Xenos factions into the meta, such as Tau, Harlequins, and the Craft World. They also go a long way in terms of helping you play into the other, potentially off-meta choices. All Xenos factions in general, they can definitely excel at, and that's just one example of a unit that has really helped me adapt to the meta and really made a change and caught people even off guard by a bit. Another example of a unit that can actually fulfill a niche role within your army to play into the top meta picks is actually Scouts. That combined with a Landspeeder Storm can actually go a very long way. Now all of a sudden you have two really cheap units that can actually help you trade quite well, especially in terms of going into factions such as the Craft Worlds, who really essentially at the core of them all are just a bunch of one wound T3 models. Now, Scouts can absolutely trade up into units such as that. You just have to really be careful with how you start to dictate the tempo of how you interact and where and when you do. That obviously comes with a lot of practice and a lot of repetition, which, that kind of actually has to be the name of the game these days is, practice makes perfect, or as I like to say, perfect practice makes perfect. But it's all about making mistakes and using these units in much different ways than maybe you would be used to using them, and seeing how they can really explore the battlefield and really help you not only contribute on the score sheet by getting points for you, but also trading up into these factions, and obviously not worrying too much about other armies that they might not trade as well into. So with that leads us into our next topic, which is a perfect segue into don't get too hung up on every single matchup and really find common solutions for a few rather than all. So what I mean by that is, for example, Tau and Custodes, you might be able to actually tech into both of them quite similarly by finding units that, for example, might be more durable or have a higher toughness, or could dish out a lot more greater damage, such as, D6 weapons, or flat 3 and above for wherever you may find. The problem is that with the ongoing shift of the meta and new armies being introduced, that causes a lot of issues in terms of, okay, well, how do I tech in for Harlequins now? Harlequins offer a much more different approach in how you have to build into them. So a big thing you have to take into consideration is equip yourself for a few, but not for all. Now, I know that kind of goes against the whole Space Marines being, a toolbox army and, natural just jack of all trades units and army composition. But right now, because of the state of the game and how we play into all these different factions throughout the meta, once you establish that core and that play style that you truly enjoy and want to approach the table with, then in terms of those tech choices, I actually recommend not going for a sprinkle of everything, but rather focus on a few specific roles that you'd like your army to approach. So, for example, if you know in your local meta, Harlequins are a big problem, I'd highly recommend including a lot more bolt guns, a lot more volume of just chaff clearing options. I've actually recently gone towards, like I said, the Firstborn Bikers, as well as actually aggressors now, because they do a great role for me. They do a multi-purpose role where they can be a counterpunch, which helps with my play style because I play quite defensively for the most part until I need to go more offensive, but also just dish out a ton of shots. That's helped me go a long way in terms of how I start to tech for these different matchups. And let's say, for example, Crusher Stampede now gives me problems. Unfortunately, you have to just take some matchups, specifically like one or two on the chin, and just do your best with what you can. Because right now, teching for everything isn't really an option, as we don't really have the tools to do so within the Space Marine Codex. So those were the main points that I wanted to focus on in terms of how to truly adapt to the meta. And obviously, with new armies creates new challenges, and depending on what they are and what they do, obviously determines which direction you go. So it's really hard to just pinpoint one specific place that you can just say, well, here's the answer. Because there is no one true answer at any given time. And like I mentioned previously, it really depends on your local meta. For example, you may have a group of 10 guys and 4 of them play Necrons. Then, I mean, it's not even a matter of list tailoring, just bring to battle, the right guns and the right combat weapons, so to speak. It's quite simple. But obviously, when you start to escalate competitively and you want to go to those larger events, such as just those big RTTs that maybe your local gaming stores might hold for you guys, or that major that's coming up that you're really looking forward to, that is the reality of how you need to prepare and how you have to look at it in the current state of the game. As Blood Angels and Space Marines are definitely not in a good position right now, but that doesn't mean we have no play at all. So don't give up. I promise there is a light at the end of this tunnel. Hopefully we can see where the balance slate takes things, and hopefully that can help us indirectly by not hurting other armies, but maybe just reeling them back down to earth, so to speak. But just to kind of summarize the 3 points, it really does start with finding your playstyle and what units truly do suit you as a general. And before I even move on, rule of cool. If you think it's super cool, that really does go a long way. If you think it's amazing and it's awesome, who cares if they're not the absolute most efficient unit on the table? You can make them work, I promise you. If you put the work in, you put the repetition in, you'll find a way to have that unit fulfill a niche role for you. Then, of course, the second point being units that, specifically have those niche roles, that's where that comes into play. If that off-meta choice really does that niche role for you, that's the direction you need to go. So, like I mentioned, units such as the Aggressors, units such as the Firstborn Bikers, the Scouts, the Storm, they really all do have a big impact on the game and the direction that you're going to play with them. Even other random choices that you might think have no plays, such as, like I made Eliminators do wonders for me, and people looked at me with a third eye when I was running 2x3 Eliminators, and I ended up winning a GT with them. And they were a huge, huge reason for my success, and just the ability to score, do damage, just irritate, harass. Units like that do go a long way. So find your eliminators, so to speak. Find something that really works for you. And then, of course, lastly, and one of the biggest keys to all of this is once you find that playstyle that you love, once you find those niche units that fulfill your roles within your core that you've developed, just make sure you don't get too hung up on your army doing everything all at once. Now, that doesn't mean you have to skew your army so hard to do one thing really well. A lot of people tend to do that. I know we've seen the builds that are just 3x3 of everything, or like such as the Void Weavers, or just insert unit times 3. That does work to some degree, but at the end of the day, armies like that tend to be gatekeepers, and that's not what we're aiming for here. We're striving for the best possible goals that we would like to reach, and that's not how you get there, unfortunately, in the long run at least. I'm sure people will do well with lists like that, because sometimes people just don't have the answers to them. But again, that's kind of why they become gatekeepers rather. And obviously, when they have another army that counters that skew, they immediately crumble. So I don't advise going that direction either. So I believe that should sum up today's tactic episode for today with tips on how to really focus on those 3 key points and elements of really how to adapt your Blood Angels to the meta. Alright guys, and that's a wrap for today's video. Hope you enjoyed. Hope it's going to be a little bit helpful for you. I know, like I mentioned before, it's kind of tough right now with the ongoing meta shifting and all these, very, what we call overpowered books are coming out. I get it. I know it's tough. I'm in the trenches right there with you. But let's get through this together. So yeah, hopefully it helped. Like I said, please like, share, subscribe, do whatever you can to support the channel. It really helps me, and I really do appreciate all your support. And please leave a comment for anything I could maybe change, do better, or just improve for you guys. Thanks.